Good morning, everybody. I want to thank the organizers for allowing me to speak on healthy living with HIV from a community perspective. My name is Romy Mathys. I'm an activist. I've been living for 30 years with HIV, so I can call myself an expert patient, and then I'm a member of the European AIDS treatment group. Along the way, I did a bachelor in social work as well. I want to talk about health and more. I want to focus a bit on emotional health, in particular fear, and my main topic is going to be disclosure, but I will also talk a bit to you about the communication between doctor and patient, as I have been running a project in Switzerland to look at the problems that are there for Swiss HIV practitioners with patients from sub-Saharan Africa. And I want to share some small of the results. We were identifying problems and discussing solutions, and some of the solutions might be exciting for you as well. So I want to also, if time allows, to share some exciting reads. There are stuff to read on the HIV business that is exciting, and maybe there will be time for your questions. Health is a state of complete physical, mental, and social well-being, and not merely the absence of disease or infirmity. I like this definition of WHO. No, it's very old, but it shows that health is a complex thing with different levels. I like to call it levels. We see 3 levels: physical, mental, and social. I will come back on these levels. There's a more modern definition that is a bit more complicated. Health is created and lived by people within the settings of their everyday life, where they learn, work, play, and love. Health is created by caring for oneself and others, by being able to take decisions and have control over one's life circumstances, and by ensuring that society one lives in creates conditions that allow the attainment of health by all its members. I've highlighted 2 lines. The first one about caring for oneself and others. I will talk about this, but I will not talk about care. I will just talk about love, because this for me is very profoundly human love, to care for myself and to care for others. And the second line highlighted is being able to take decisions. And I really feel that for me to be able to take a decision on antiretroviral treatment, I need my doctor to empower me. So that is a line that I think is very important for you. So it was my doctor who explained to me how treatment works and where are the pros and cons of this medication and that medication and this combination and that combination. So I think the fact that I'm healthy and well and will not complain about side effects is a result of a very good collaboration between my doctor and me. And I hope that you manage, all of you who are doctors, you manage to get onto this good collaboration, and I can contribute to it by presenting this. While I was studying social work, I came across a medical sociologist called Aaron Antonovsky. Aaron Antonovsky saw that some patients with chronic disease were managing very well and others not. And he wanted to find out why and what it means, you know? So actually, most of you of the biomedical science community, you know pathogenesis, that answers to the question, what creates disease? So Antonovsky actually felt that something is missing, and that is salutogenesis, the question of what creates health. So he came up with the health disease continuum that actually, please the colors are not new age. The colors are merely to indicate that health and disease have different levels. So I tried to make the levels visible by using different colors. So he says that there is a continuum where on one side you have health and the other side you have disease. And as an individual, I will move along. I will move towards disease or move towards health during my life. And this situation can change from year to year, from month to month, as you know. So it's really an exciting concept. And as I said, he was researching why are some people coping better with chronic disease and others not. And what he found is actually exactly what I have been experiencing in the 90s. In the 90s, there was no medication. I survived 10 years without medication. So what did we do? We came together as people living with HIV, and we shared information, and we shared strategies, and we would share things like, do you know that a hug is increasing CD4 count? Do you know that Tai Chi is increasing your CD4 levels? You know, such things. Or do you know that beetroot is very healthy? All kind of strategies we shared. And we tried to understand what HIV is about. So Antonovsky actually came up with a sense of coherence, which is 3 components. It's comprehensibility. Do I understand HIV? Do I understand what is happening in my body if I'm HIV positive? It's manageability. It's also called the emotional aspect. How do I manage with HIV? And especially now with treatment, how do I manage treatment? How do I manage to be a constant patient, to see my doctor every 6 months, to take everyday medication, to remember every day that I'm HIV positive? How do I manage? And most importantly, I think, meaningfulness. It's also called the motivational aspect, and it's how does HIV make sense in my life? How do I make sense out of HIV? So if I look back, you know, on what we have been doing in the support group, we actually have been building our sense of coherence, because we were talking about what HIV does, what it is, and how we understand it, how we manage treatment. We were talking a lot about side effects and which drug has which side effects and whether we should switch or not. And we were talking a lot about what is the meaning of HIV? Why am I HIV positive? Or has my life still sense being HIV positive? So if I could be a doctor and prescribe, I would prescribe, you know, to build sense of coherence for people living with HIV. And that is why I want to emphasize how important support groups, peer work, psychosocial support, counseling, however you call it, how important it is for people living with HIV to talk about it, to understand it, to manage it, and to make sense of it. And unfortunately, in Switzerland, for example, support groups have been drying out. We don't have support groups anymore. So I don't know how it is in the rest of Europe. I've heard similar things from the UK. So our local AIDS association in AIDS Hilfe Bern has come up with a new project that is a peer-to-peer project where I'm employed as a peer worker. So my task is to be a peer to those who are diagnosed with HIV. Lots of them are sub-Saharan migrants who are afraid to talk to anybody about HIV. So actually what we do is the same what we used to do in the 90s in the support groups, but now these people are too much afraid to go into any support group. Even the thought of going to a support group is frightening to them, because they are too much frightened that anybody from the African community they come from could ever learn that they are HIV positive. Which actually brings me back to the health continuum. As we heard with the definition, the health continuum is health is just more than physical health, and we've been hearing a lot yesterday about physical health, but there is also mental health, emotional health, and let's not forget spiritual health. When I was talking about meaningfulness, what do I believe? That is very important, that in a spiritual way, how can I make sense of HIV? So when I lived in South Africa in 2000, 2001, 2002, there was no medication there. So I would meet South African people living with HIV who told me, you know, I'm HIV positive and I'm going to die of AIDS. And I was like, no, you can live with HIV for many years. And they did not seem to know that. So I created this workshop using those 4 levels as a structure for the workshop. I would actually put up flip charts, one for physical health, one for mental health, one for emotional health, and one for spiritual health, and explain to them what it means that spiritual health is what I believe, emotional health is what I feel, mental health is what I can think and understand, and physical health is my body and what I can see. And I asked them, what do you do in your life if you feel bad, if you feel sad, if you don't feel well, to get better? And they immediately understood, and they came up with so many strategies, so that we managed to fill all those flip charts with all kinds of strategies for them to see that they have a lot of possibilities to work, to strengthen their immune system, and to work building their health, so that they were not helpless in the face of HIV. And I've been Googling the health continuum 2 weeks ago, and I saw that meanwhile the nursing community has taken up the whole thing and has even added more levels. There is seemingly also social health and environmental health. Well, however you call it, or however many levels there are, I just want to emphasize health is more than physical health. And especially emotional health, this is something that you cannot easily study. You know, there are no graphs and data I can present you on this, because it's difficult to actually talk about it, and that's why I want to focus on it. And I want to tell you that love contributes to health. I've experienced it. I met my South African friend who actually was talking the same, she was singing the same song, and that connected us over continents. And it was such a success when I once turned on the TV and I heard the Swiss cohort professor talk on TV to say that actually loving relationship support the immune system and increase CD4 levels and increase quality of life of people living with HIV. Of course, those scientists will not talk about love. They will call it stable partnerships. Allow me to just call it love. And I don't speak of sexual love. I speak of very profound human love, of caring for one another, to another. And I also think that disclosure is a very important thing. It's actually an act of love and trust. And I know what I talk about because for years I was living in fear. I was so afraid to tell anybody about HIV. And though I knew the dilemma that if I don't tell, how can anybody accept me? Actually, my biggest wish was to be accepted, but if I don't make this step, You know, if I don't tell, so people cannot accept me. The dilemma was clear, but I didn't find a way out of this. So I believe that disclosure to a partner, or if I have more than one partner, to partners, and here I speak about sexual partners, but also to a friend or to family members, is very important and crucial. And I observe in Switzerland that social workers will counsel people living with HIV, telling them that, you know, if you don't want to disclose, you don't have to. The law is protecting you. Legally, there is no obligation to disclose. That is true. I agree. But that cannot be the solution. It cannot be, to me, it's not acceptable that people living with HIV should live a life in fear. So at some stage, we have to look at disclosure. We have to take on the process of disclosure. I know it's difficult, I know it's not easy, but it is liberating and it will enhance quality of life. I've experienced it, and I know a lot of activists who have done it, and you can ask all of them. None of them will tell you that they regret ever having disclosed. So the benefit of disclosure is a liberating experience. It's also important to find support. That can be through support groups or peers. That can be just through counseling. But it's a lot of people living with HIV with a new diagnosis tend to isolate themselves, tend not to tell anybody. So as a peer worker now, I work with sub-Saharan migrants who really don't tell anybody. I'm the only support. But at least I am one person who is supporting them, and I'm one person who has accepted them with HIV. That is a start. So they had to disclose at least to me. So that is the first disclosure. I want to talk about fear, because to me it is the motor behind discrimination and stigma. And it is the one thing. By the way, I will continue on fear, but I had to put the resource about the partnership study that increases CD4 levels on my presentation, and then I have put all the resources on my presentation so that there is a scientific evidence that love contributes to health. Fear. We all know about the vicious circle of fear, so I don't even dwell on that. But I want to talk about fear. That is the one thing that connects us, people living with HIV. There's one thing we have in common, it's a virus. And with the diagnosis, I believe all of us experience fear. And that fear can be the fear of stigma and discrimination, of course. That is the first that springs up to mind, but it's also the fear of disease and death. And even now that we have art, antiretroviral therapy, that fear is still there, because fear is not rational, it's irrational. So one of my clients told me, she's on art, she's undetectable, and she said, I'm afraid to die of AIDS. So what should I do? Should I tell her, don't be afraid, treatment works? That will not help her to overcome this fear. So I really think we have to look at fear and work with fear. There's also the fear, I experienced the fear to infect another person for a long time, until the Swiss statement came out in 2008 and told me that if I'm taking treatment and it works, I'm not infectious anymore. So that burden has been off my shoulder. But there is still fear, and fear impacts on the immune system in a way that you cannot measure like that. Maybe a person living in fear will develop other diseases that after you as doctors can measure or diagnose, but fear is stress and it's impacting on our health. So my experience is that I cannot outrun my fear. I tried. It never worked, you know. So I don't know if you know Tai Chi. In the young form, there is one position that you say, grab the tiger by his ears. And it's a nice image for how I've learned or how I coped with fear. I had at some stage to confront my fears. And though it was very difficult and I was very afraid and I was walking at the hand of my therapist, like this fear was like a monster. I would, for months, go around. At some stage, I had the courage, I developed the courage to actually face it, to actually talk to my father and to tell him that I'm HIV positive. And the most exciting thing was that actually he responded in a other way than I was sure he would respond. So I had to find that he took me in his arms and said, you are my daughter, whether there is HIV or not. But in my head, I had imagined a completely different scenario, a horrible scenario that was not even real. So I had spent all those years in fear and horror for nothing. So after this experience, that encouraged me to disclose to my boss at my workspace, to disclose to my friends, and my quality of life has changed. A burden has fallen off my shoulders. I did not have to live a lie anymore, because before I felt that I was lying to the whole world. I was playing a nice Romy, healthy and everything, while in reality I was feeling depressed, I was isolating more and more, and I didn't know how to cope with HIV. So I think that a lot of people living with HIV are caught up in this vicious circle of fear and stigma. And we cannot just say, yes, you don't have to disclose. That is not good enough. So I've come up with what I would like to say. This is what it needs to make disclosure happen. Disclosure is a process. It's complicated. It's complex. It needs information and empowerment. It needs psychosocial support. It needs counseling, maybe therapy. Because HIV is a trigger. We all live with fear, but with some people, HIV will trigger a real profound fear of death. And maybe it's important to look at this and to go through therapy. I had a therapy, and I'm thankful for this, and that's why I'm standing here. I would not be alive if I had not had this therapy. And that's why I'm an activist and try to share this, because I needed help to survive. And I would like to provide this help to other people who are in the same situation. It was very important for me to see role models, to see people who had disclosed when I was living in fear. Every time I saw somebody on TV who was saying, I live with HIV, it felt like, oh, great, there's somebody who is brave enough. Maybe one day I will get there. So it is important to have people who give HIV a face. And it is important to have peer support and support groups. And it is important as well to have a supportive environment. So the disclosure process is a double-sided process. It takes me, as a person living with HIV, to be brave enough to disclose. But it takes the community and the environment to accept me with my HIV. So I see on a macro level, on a societal level, and as a community level, also a challenge that community and society accepts me with HIV. And even there, as people living with HIV, we can contribute, because I've been talking, I don't know how many hours and how many days, to journalists. Or I've been appearing on TV, not because I like to be on TV, but to encourage other people and to actually talk to all those people who don't know about HIV, to actually create a supportive environment, to create something that will allow people to disclose in Switzerland. And it was very important for me that the first acts of disclosure, the first person I disclosed to accepted me with HIV. I needed this success experience to be encouraged to disclose to other people. So if you facilitate this process of disclosure, it's very important to choose wisely to which person to disclose first, where you will see that there is a chance that this person will accept me with HIV. And if those factors are there, disclosure might, can, should, will happen. So I would like to introduce what I call steps towards ending HIV discrimination. I believe everybody with an HIV diagnosis at some stage is living with fear of discrimination, and we have to facilitate the process of disclosure. So it might take weeks, months, or years. Every individual has another time to get there, to be brave enough to disclose. But if the person discloses, she will be liberated, he will be liberated. People living with HIV will live healthier lives if they disclose. And I don't speak of public disclosing the way I disclose now to you. I just speak of, family, friends, maybe workplace will be very important. And some of them, maybe out of 10, one, maybe out of 21, will get excited about this whole thing and start to do peer work and start to do solidarity work. The way I stand here and do solidarity work talking to you, and help those who are still stuck in the vicious circle of fear and stigma to get out of it. So I believe that we have neglected this circle too much. All the excitement about art, antiretroviral treatment that works was a huge success, so we could treat people, but we forgot about this. And this is part of health, and this is part of well-being of people living with HIV. It's, to me, simply not, I have to, okay. Let me just about intercultural communication and doctor-patient relationship. I found this very interesting that if you have, as a Swiss doctor or UK doctor or European doctor, a sub-Saharan migrant or migrant from wherever, there are so many differences in knowledge, habits, intentions, emotions, communication styles, identities, personality, and perception, that it becomes difficult to talk. So we should be aware of this, and that is why patient-centered communication is very important. There's this Professor Wolf Langewitz who suggests that actually as doctors have used the stage metaphor. Imagine the patient perform his worries on a stage. But for him to perform, you as a doctor have to give him the space to perform. So meaning you have to ask questions. Not questions like, did you understand? Yes, no. No, you would ask, what did you understand? You would ask open questions to make the person talk. You would wait after the patient finishes, because maybe after 3 or 4 seconds, he will add something that is very important, that he maybe would not dare to ask or not dare to say. Or you would echo something that the patient said. You would ask, did I understand you right? Are you telling me that you've been spending the whole weekend all by yourself? Or you would summarize what the patient says to build trust and confidence so that the patient is actually telling you what's going on. There are more techniques. I know I'm over time. I'm sorry, but it's on my presentation. So let me just talk about motivational interviewing. It's so exciting because it's like the Asian fighting technique. It came from the drug rehabilitation, where the doctor wants something and the patient wants something else. So they don't want the same. So instead of conflicting, this suggests that you use techniques where you actually use the power of the patients for your own good. So it's very interesting and makes sense to look at it. And please be non-judgmental, because the studies I read, I saw that a lot of sub-Saharan migrants are afraid to talk to their doctors about what they believe, because they are afraid to be judged as stupid, non-educated, or crazy, or whatever, you know. So let me close with a quote. AIDS, it's Saki Ahmed from the Treatment Action Campaign in South Africa, who said, AIDS isn't something we're going to cure, it's going to cure us. And I would like to summarize what I talked about by saying it's not acceptable for people living with HIV to spend their lives in fear. Let's work together to facilitate disclosure. Very exciting read. Peter Pyatt, he used to be the UNAIDS director, No Time to Lose. I just finished it. He's a medical doctor, so you will understand what he's talking about. And Elisabeth Pesani. So that's just suggestions, and thank you very much.